Hello, dear students. Today we are starting the next topic of Chapter 1, that is Biological Classification. In this lecture, we shall dive into how various living organisms are divided according to their shape, feeding behavior, structural anatomy, and reproduction. So do not miss any slide of today's lecture. This is going to give you ample knowledge of biological organisms. Let us start now with Animal Kingdom. Animals are the movers and shakers of the biological world. Unlike plants, which sit still and make their own food, animals have evolved a high-energy lifestyle that requires a completely different cellular and behavioral blueprint. First of all, what makes an animal an animal? It comes down to three key cellular rules. Number one is multicellularity. We are not just one cell, we are trillions of specialized cells working together. And secondly, no cell wall. This is very crucial to understand. Without a rigid wall, our cells can be flexible, allowing us to develop complex muscles and move. And thirdly, we have no chloroplast. Since we cannot eat sunlight, we use holozoic nutrition. So what is holozoic nutrition? This is the formal term for eating. It involves ingestion and internal digestion. Ingestion, that is taking in solid food, and internal digestion, that is breaking that food down inside a specialized gut or tract. To organize the millions of animals on earth, we have divided the kingdom into phyla, and each phylum, that is the singular of phyla. So each phylum represents a unique body plan. Here is your master list of the most important groups. Here we have given you only 8 phyla out of 23 which have been listed here. We are not going to cover all these 8 in this chapter, but many of these will be understood, and we shall have a lecture on many of these phylum or many of these groups. So every one of these groups solved the problem of survival in a different way. If you look at the key features of these 8 phyla, you will find different survival strategies. So let's take a closer look at the most successful group of animals on the planet, which have armored skin and jointed legs, that is arthropods. But before that, we should be very clear about a term, that is invertebrate. So in almost every biological textbook, you will see animals divided into two groups, vertebrates and invertebrates. But there is a secret that might surprise you. While vertebrate is a real biological group, invertebrate is actually a taxonomic trap. To understand why, we have to look at how we group these things in vertebrate and invertebrates. Vertebrates, this is a true group because every vertebrate from a tiny frog to a massive whale shares a common ancestor that had a backbone. They are all cousins in a clear family tree. While in invertebrates, this is just a term of convenience. We use it to describe anything that does not have a backbone. But grouping things by what they lack does not mean they are related. For example, think about it this way: an octopus and a dragonfly. Octopus belongs to mollusk and dragonfly belongs to arthropod. These both are called invertebrates. However, they are less related to each other than a human is to a goldfish. So the lesson for your exams here and your future studies is this: Classification should be based on shared features, not missing one. Remember this term. Classification should be based on shared features, not missing ones. Just because two things both lack a backbone does not mean they belong in the same box of life. So now, as we have cleared up that trap, let's look at the group that actually does share a massive list of unique features, that is phylum Arthropoda. If life were a competition, arthropods would be the winners. They make up over 80% of all known animal species. Their name literally means jointed foot, and that, along with their incredible armor, is the secret to their global success. Every arthropod, from a tiny ant to a giant crab, shares three golden rules of design. Number one, the exoskeleton, that is cuticle. That is a hard outer shell made of chitin. It is like a suit of armor that prevents desiccation, which is just a fancy word for drying out. And secondly, jointed limbs. Because the shell is rigid, they need flexible joints to move. This allows for incredible speed and precision. And thirdly is segmented bodies. Their bodies are divided into distinct sections like a head for sensing and a thorax for movement. So to identify which class an arthropod belongs to, biologists use a simple checklist of legs, antenna, and body parts. This table is your friend for revision. If you memorize this table, you can easily identify either it is an insect, it belongs to arachnids, it belongs to crustacea, it belongs to myriapods. For example, if there are three body regions, three pairs of legs, one pair of antennae, okay, then that belongs to class insect, okay. And if that arthropod has two body regions, that is cephalothorax and abdomen, and four pairs of legs, but there is no antennae, then that is arachnids. And similarly, if there are 5 plus pairs of legs and 2 pairs of antennae, and if there are 1 or 2 pairs per segment and 1 pair of antennae, that is myriapods. So by identifying, to identify any kind of uh, living organism belonging to phylum Arthropoda, we can easily identify by memorizing this table. In this table, you will find this thing that if there is no antennae, then that is an arachnids. Now this is a question for you, that if you find a bug in the garden with 8 legs and no antennae, which class does it belong to? I think you can easily answer now that question in the comments section. Let's see who comments that first. These are three diagrams of insect, arachnid, and myriapod, and you can easily identify, differentiate between all these three. So when you're looking at a diagram in an exam, first of all, count the legs. If there are 6 legs, this is an insect. If 8 legs, this is an arachnid. And if it has 2 pairs of antennae, it is almost certainly a crustacean. Okay, so you can easily identify these all living organisms. The next one is vertebrates, which are animals with backbones. Now we shall move to this new branch of family tree. While insects have their bones on the outside, we have our blueprint on the inside. This internal support system is what allows a beluga whale to grow as big as a building and a cheetah to run like a rocket. So every vertebrate, from a tiny goldfish to a human, shares three core structural features. First of all is the spine. That is a vertebral column made of individual vertebrae that acts as a protective tunnel for the spinal cord. And secondly, the cranium. Cranium is a specialized skull that protects a highly developed brain. Number three is internal skeleton, which is also called as an endoskeleton, that is made of bone or cartilage. Unlike an insect's shell, our skeleton grows with us, so we never have to mold. To classify vertebrates into their five main classes. Five main classes, which one? Fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. So classify these main classes. Biologists look at how they breathe, how they reproduce, and what covers their skin. This is a favorite topic for your exam question. So if you are stuck on a question, look at the fertilization. Fish and amphibians usually need water to reproduce. In first two rows, you can find that fish and amphibians usually need water to reproduce, that is external reproduction, while reptiles, birds, and mammals have evolved to reproduce on dry land, that is internal. This was a massive turning point in evolution. In this table, you can also find the which type of egg they have, which kind of fertilization, which kind of respiratory organs, and which kind of skin covering. These all five classes have. And by memorizing this table, you can easily imagine that which type of class has which kind of features. We have seen how animals are built, but how do we actually identify a mystery creature when we find one in the wild? It's a time to learn that language. You can also call that as dichotomous key. So first of all, fish. Okay, fish, that is, if we talk about the evolutionary advantage and functions, the upper column protects the gills. The later line detects vibrations or movement in water. Secondly is amphibians. Amphibians are those animals which can live both in dry land and wet land. Means they can both they lead a double life, water to land. Their moist skin allows for cutaneous respiration, that is breathing through skin. And third is reptiles. They have amniotic egg, that is very different from the others. The private pond shell allows for reproduction in dry environments away from water. And the fourth one is birds. Okay, they provide high strength with a minimal weight for flight. And last one is mammals. They have mammary glands and diaphragm. Mammary glands nourish young. The diaphragm is a specialized muscle for highly efficient breathing. You have probably heard the terms cold-blooded and warm-blooded before, but in professional biology, we use more precise language to describe how animals handle heat. It is all about whether an animal's body temperature is a slave to the environment or if they control it themselves. Basically, there are two main strategies for thermoregulation. The first one is poikilothermic. For example, fish, amphibians, and reptiles. These three belong to poikilothermic. Their internal temperature fluctuates with the environment. Remember it. The internal temperature fluctuates with the environment. If the water is cold, the fish is cold. Since they cannot turn up the heat internally, they use behavior to stay alive like a crocodile, basking in the sun to warm its blood before a hunt. The next one is homeothermic. Birds and mammals belong to this category. They maintain a constant, steady internal temperature regardless of the outside world. This allows for high activity levels in any climate, even in the freezing Arctic. It is expensive. It requires a much higher intake of food, like energy, to generate that internal heat. So a bird has to eat much more than a lizard of the same size. And here I also give you a tip regarding your exams that many times examiners like to ask about the trade-off. So what is that? Poikilotheriums are energy efficient. They can go weeks without food, while homotherms are high performance. They are always ready for action, but they are always hungry. So the next topic is about plant kingdom. When we look at plants, we are not just looking at different shapes. We are looking at an evolutionary journey. To classify them, biologists look at two big things: the vascular tissue, which is basically a plant's plumbing system, and how they make babies, means spores versus seeds. This journey begins with the simplest forms, that is algae. Algae are the most ancestral members of the plant kingdom. You will find them primarily in aquatic habitats like oceans, lakes, and ponds. Because they live submerged in water, their design is very simple. Number one, they have no true roots. They do not need to suck water out of the ground because they are already surrounded by it. And secondly, they have no true stem or leaves since they are supported by the buoyancy of the water. They do not need a rigid trunk to stand up straight. Every part of an alga can absorb nutrients and sunlight directly from the water, making them the ultimate low maintenance plants. So in exams, often students confuse about in between seaweed, that is algae, and sea grass, that is a flowering plant. What is the key difference in between them? Seagrass has a vascular system. We shall study that later on in this lecture. Seagrass has a vascular system, that is veins and true roots, while algae do not. So remember this difference between seaweed and seagrass. These both are different. Remember, if it has veins, it is a more advanced plant. Okay. So algae are perfect for the water, but what happens when plants tried to move onto the land? They needed a way to stay moist and stand up. So let's look at the first land explorers, that is Bryophytes, mosses. We also call that mosses. So imagine trying to build a skyscraper without any plumbing. You could not get water to the top floors, right? That is exactly the challenge bryophytes like mosses and liverworts face. They were the first to explore the land, but because they never developed pipes, they have to stay very close to the ground. So bryophytes are defined by what they lack, that is vascular tissue. They have no vascular tissue. Without xylem to pump water up or phloem to move sugar down, these plants have to rely on simple diffusion process. This is why mosses never grow into giant trees. They have to hug the ground to stay hydrated. Secondly, they are restricted to moist, shaded environments. Why? Because they still need a literal film of water for the sperm to swim to the egg. No water, no next generation. So that is the reason they have to stay very closer to water. Instead of deep complex roots, these bryophytes have rhizoids. These are tiny hair-like structures that anchor them to rocks or bark, but they don't suck up water the way true roots do. So in your exams, if you're asked why mosses are always found in damp places, give two reasons. They lack vascular tissue to transport water, number one, and number two, they need water for fertilization, so their swimming sperm can reach the egg. Now imagine trying to build a skyscraper without a water pump. You would be stuck living on the ground floor. For millions of years, plants were stuck being small. But then they invented vascular tissues, a high-tech plumbing system that is a very high-tech plumbing system that allowed them to conquer the centers of continents and grow into the massive trees which we are seeing today. So this plumbing system consists of two specialized types of tissues, that is xylem, which acts like a one-way straw, transporting water and minerals from the roots all the way up to the leaves. It's also incredibly strong. In fact, wood is mostly just layers of old reinforced xylem. And secondly is phloem. Phloem has two-way street that transports sugars, sucrose or sugars and amino acids from the leaves to the rest of the plant. Because they could finally move water hundreds of feet above the ground, plants began to compete for sunlight, leading to the first great forests. Now we can categorize these plants based on how they reproduce. So for this, we can use this table to differentiate. First of all, ferns. The example is bracken and tree ferns that they have transport system of xylem and phloem, and the method of reproduction is spores. We can study these ferns in our next slide, but here is only the introduction of these. Second is conifers. Okay, conifers also have xylem and phloem, but their method of reproduction is seeds which are found in their cones. And thirdly are flowering plants like roses and grass. Okay, they also have xylem and phloem as their transport system, and also bear seeds which are found inside the fruits and flowers. So ferns are the middle ground or plant evolution. They have the advanced plumbing vascular tissue of a tree, but they still use the ancient reproductive method, that is spores of a moss. So at first glance, now we are going moving towards ferns. Okay, so at first glance, a fern might just look like a pretty garden plant, but under the surface, it is a marvel of biological engineering. Ferns were the first plants to evolve a sophisticated internal skeleton and plumbing system, allowing them to stand tall and grow much larger than any moss ever could be. So the body plan of a fern is quite unique compared to the trees you see outside. Number one is the rhizome, that is underground stem. In many ferns, the trunk or many stem actually grows horizontally underground. This acts as a sturdy anchor and a storage unit for nutrients. Second one is adventitious root system. These are specialized roots that grow directly out of the underground stem, that is the rhizome. So instead of one giant taproot, they form a web that pulls water and minerals directly into the plant's plumbing. And then is fronds, which are specialized leaves. We don't call them just leaves, we call them fronds. Okay, fronds. They are high-tech solar panels with a complex internal anatomy. The first one is palisade layer, which is our top layer, packed tightly with chloroplast to catch every bit of sunlight. And secondly, spongy mesophyll, which is a lower layer with air space that allow the plant to breathe, that is for gaseous exchange. So when an exam question asks how a fern is more advanced than a moss, your answer should focus on two things. Number one is vascular tissue, means they have xylem and phloem. And secondly, they have true roots, that is adventitious root system. These are the features that allowed plants to finally leave the damp shadows and head for the sun. So ferns have the plumbing, but they still have one major weakness. They reproduce using spores, which need water to survive. To truly conquer the desert, plants needed a survival pod. Before that, we should understand that how these reproduce. So if you have ever walked through a forest in the spring, you might have seen strange coiled structures poking out of the mud that look like the top of a violin. These are not just pretty shapes, they are a specialized survival strategy called succinate vernation. Okay, succinate vernation. This is the succinate vernation explanation. Okay, that is unlike a rose or an oak tree, which grows from a protective bud. A fern leaf grows by unrolling. And secondly, the fiddlehead. This is the common name for the tightly coiled young frond because the growing tip of a leaf is very soft and delicate. The fern keeps it tucked safely inside the coil as it pushes through the tough soil. So instead of adding new segments, the existing cells in the coil begin to lengthen. As they grow, the tension causes the leaf to unroll and expand into its mature flat shape. So this method ensures that the most important part of the leaf, the tip, where growth happens, is the last part to be exposed to the environment. In a practical exam or a drawing task, look for that spiral shape. If you see, this is an exam tip for you, okay? You should note it down. If you see a coiled young leaf, it is a diagnostic feature of a fern. Flowering plants almost never grow this way. So if in an identification task, if a question asks you to state one visible feature that shows this plant is a fern, do not just say it has leaves. Every plant has leaves. Okay. Instead, look for sorry on the underside of the leaves or the lack of flowers. Those are the marking point answers. Okay. Here you can find that. Here you can find that. That is sorus. Okay. So if you want to pass your biology practical with flying colors, you need to learn how to read a plant like a detective. By looking at a single leaf or a petal, you can tell exactly how that plant's internal plumbing is organized and even how its ancestors grew millions of years ago. So the first one is evolutionary age. Flowering plants, we also call that as angiosperms. Okay, you should also be aware of these two terms, that is angiosperms and gymnosperms. Flowering plants are angiosperms, okay, and the conifers, they belong to gymnosperms. Okay, so flowering plants did not just evolve to look pretty. They developed three massive advantages, that is enclosed seeds, means their seeds are tucked safely inside an ovary. Secondly, fruit development. That ovary matures into a fruit which acts as a delivery vehicle for seed dispersal. And the third one is targeted pollination. So instead of wasting trillions of pollen grains on the wind, they hire specific insects or birds or bats to do the work for them. But how to tell them apart means they have also different types that like which are divided in two groups, monocots and dicots. These monocots and dicots can be easily identified if you remember, if you memorize this table which you are seeing on this slide. That mono means one and di means two. So monocots are have single seed leaf. Dicots means dicotyledons, they have paired seed leaves. And if you are talking about leaf shape, okay, on the bottom left bottom, you can easily you can easily differentiate between monocots and dicots. This is their leaf shape and this is their venation, okay, means veins. If you find monocots, they have parallel veins, okay, they have parallel veins. But in dicotyledons, the venation is branching, means that is netted, okay, you can see here that. Then flowering parts, if you talk about the flower parts, then in monocots, that is multiply of 3. You can find here 1 2 3 4 5 6, okay, then that is the multiply of 3. But the floral parts of dicots, they are multiples of 4 or 5. And then the root system, in monocots the root system is fibrous. We also call that as adventitious root system, okay. But in dicots, the root system is tap root system. There is one main deep root. So by identifying these simple features which are very easily visible with naked eye, we can differentiate between monocotyledons and dicotyledons. So next one is the flowering plants, means seed producing plants. This is our next slide, that is flowering plants, okay. If you focus on examination point of view, you should know about these three simple rules, that is scattered stem, taproot root system and vein rule. The scattered stem, if in exam diagrams, if you see a cross section of a stem where the vascular bundles like xylem phylum look like random monkey faces, okay, scattered everywhere, then that is a monocot, okay. uh, you can look at here, this is scattered, not in definite shape. But if they are lined up like a necklace in a circle, it is a dicot, okay, this is a dicot. Secondly, root system, two root system, we have two root system, that is taproot system and fibrous root system. Fibrous root system, if you find roots arranged in this way, then that is a monocot. But if there is a distinctive deep root, okay, then that is a taproot. So taproot, if you find taproot, then that is a dicot. If you find fibrous root, then that is a monocot. And as I explained you in my previous slide, that if you find a leaf with parallel veins, okay, then that is a monocot. And if veins are branched, like you can see here, then that is a dicot. And this is very interesting that most of the words food like grains or rice, those are monocots. And if you see anywhere leaf of a wheat or a rice, you can see that their venation is parallel. So the next topic is Fungi Kingdom. So when you see a mushroom in the woods, you are only seeing the fruit. The actual living body of the fungus is hidden right beneath your feet, spreading out like a biological internet. It is made of two main parts, hyphae and the mycelium. So let's look at the building blocks of a fungus. The first one is hyphae. These are individual microscopic filaments. Measure them as tiny hollow tubes. Just like insects, fungi have a rigid cell wall made of chitin. This gives them the strength to push through soil or wood. And hyphae grow incredibly fast at their tips, constantly scouting the environment for new sources of food. And the next one is mycelium. So when thousands of hyphae branch out and weave together, they form a dense mass called a mycelium. That is the gut of the fungus. This is the actual feeding part of the organism. It is usually hidden underground or inside a food source like a rotting log or a piece of moldy bread, digesting everything it touches. So the mushroom you see above ground is just a temporary structure built by the mycelium to spread spores. The mycelium itself can live for decades or even centuries, silently recycling nutrients back into the ecosystem. In most living things, a cell is like a room with four walls and one occupant, the nucleus. But in many fungi, like the common bread mold Rhizopus, the walls are missing. Instead of a series of rooms, the fungus is like one long open plan hallway where everything allows together. This unique structure is called a multinucleate state, and it is a master class in efficiency. In many fungi, the hyphae are not divided by cross walls called septa because they lack these barriers. We call them aspetate. Okay, I hope you remember this word aspetate. Secondly, they have continuous cytoplasm. Without walls, their cytoplasm acts like a river, flowing freely along the entire length of the hyphae. This allows the fungus to rapidly transport nutrients and organelles to the growing tips where they are needed most. Because they have no internal walls to separate them. A single strand of fungus can contain hundreds or even thousands of nuclei, all sharing the same space and working together to control the organism. Okay, here you can see multinucleate, that is a distinctive feature of fungi. So if you are asked to compare a plant cell to a fungal hypha, here is your 3-point scoring guide. Okay, you can differentiate considering the cell wall. Plant cell wall is made of cellulose while fungi cell wall is made of chitin. Okay, the second differentiation is for the organization. Plants have tissues, while fungi, they have mycelium or hyphae. And thirdly, which is a very important, plant cells have single nucleus, while fungi cells are multinucleate. They have thousands of nuclei. Imagine if you did not have to chew your food. Instead, you just walked up to a pizza, spit on it, and watched it turn into a soup that you then soaked up through your skin. That sounds like science fiction, but for a fungus, that is exactly how lunch works. All fungi are heterotrophic. Since they have no chloroplast, they must get the energy from other organic matter. They do this by using three specialized tools. First one is extracellular digestion. This is the fungal secret weapon. Instead of an internal stomach, they perform digestive spitting. The hyphae secrete powerful enzymes directly onto their food, like a rotting leaf or a bread. These enzymes then break down complex starch and proteins into simple sugars and amino acids outside of the fungus. The second one is chitin shield. Here you might wonder that why don't the enzymes digest the fungus too? Because the answer is the chitin cell wall. Chitin is incredibly tough and chemically resistant, acting like a biohazard suit that protects the hyphae from their own digestive juices. And the third one is Hostoria. You can also call them as straws. In parasitic fungi, the hyphae develop specialized tips called Hostoria. Okay, these poke through a living plant's cell wall to reach the sugar-rich cytoplasm. They act like tiny straws, stealing nutrients without immediately killing the host cell. So when describing fungal nutrition, you should keep in mind secretes enzymes, digest externally, and absorb the products. Their specific sequence is exactly what examiners are looking for when they grade your questions, your answers on saprophytic or parasitic fungi. Now, here are important necessary concepts to remember about fungi. All fungi are heterotrophic. Okay, unlike plants, they lack chloroplast and cannot manufacture their own sugars from sunlight. This means they are entirely dependent on organic matter, whether that matter is a fallen log or a living host. On a fallen log, if a fungi is dependent on a fallen log, then that is a saprophytic fungi. And if a fungi is getting food from a living host, then that is a parasitic fungi. Okay, remember this difference. Secondly, fungi do not eat in the traditional sense. They perform extracellular digestion. The hyphae secretes powerful digestive enzymes directly onto the food source. These enzymes then break down complex molecules like cellulose or lignin into a simple nutrient soup. And this fungus then drink this soup, absorbing the pre-digested nutrients back through the hyphal walls. And the third necessary concept about fungi, that is the chitin shield. If these enzymes are strong enough to dissolve a tree trunk, why do not they dissolve the fungus itself? The answer simply lies in the chitin cell wall, as I explained you earlier. Chitin is a tough, nitrogen-containing polysaccharide. It is chemically resistant to the fungus' own digestive enzymes, acting as a biohazard suit that protects the living cytoplasm inside. And then specialized hunters means hostoria. When a fungus chooses a living host rather than dead material, it uses a specialized tool called hostoria. Okay, if you find a name hostorium, do not get confused because hostorium is singular of hostoria. Okay, and what is their mechanism? They are modified hyphal tips that penetrate the cell walls of a host plant. We call that as a straw effect. They do not puncture the cell's plasma membrane, which would kill the cell immediately. Instead, they push against it, creating a large surface area to sip sugars and nutrients directly from the host cytoplasm. So by keeping the host cell alive, the parasite ensures a long-term steady supply of food. That is the straw effect.